what about Meracydia, the southern continent? Do you know aught of its present state of affairs?
Meracydia is the last great continent of Aetheris we have yet to explore. We're going there to be sure, it's just a matter of when. We know a little bit about its history, but its status in the modern day is a mystery. So, in this video, we will go over everything we know about Meracydia. Then I'll go into theory mode to explore what this continent is likely to be like and what to expect, based upon the official lore and story of FF14 up until this point. Class is in session. Let's begin with a brief history lesson. Namiwe, sit up straight.
Sorry, Professor.
Meracydia first appeared in history at some point after the Sundering. Midgard Sormr had recently arrived on Aetheris, clutching his 7 remaining eggs. In exchange for his services to Hydaelyn, his kind would be allowed to make Aetheris their new home. When his 7 children became full grown, they scattered to many different regions. Of these 7, Tiamat and Bahamut would both venture to Meracydia and created broods of their own, becoming the first post-Sundering to call this continent home. Fast forward to the Second Astral Era, and mankind would also arrive in these lands, dispersing into multiple tribes. It didn't take long for these tribes to start fighting amongst themselves. Their conflict ended with the intervention of the Dawn Wyrm Bahamut, who helped these people settle their differences, and peace returned to the continent. Meracydia would then go silent. It wouldn't be until 5,000 years ago that the continent would first appear in our history books. The Allagan Empire, with their recently resurrected Emperor Xande, set their sights upon conquering Meracydia, and dedicated all their resources to the endeavour. A war unlike any other had come to Meracydia. The continent was bravely defended by the people who called it home, alongside Tiamat, Bahamut and their broods. But the Empire made more and more ground. Things only got worse when Dawn Wyrm Bahamut was killed by Allagan War Machina. The people turned to summoning primals to slow the Empire down, but Allag responded with their summoners, who defeated and helped capture many of these beings. Even when Tiamat in her grief summoned the Elder Primal Bahamut, the Empire could not be stopped, with Bahamut being defeated and captured by Omega. The final straw was Allag's use of a vast Void Saint army that swept over what remained of Meracydia. In the end, Allag proved victorious. Meracydia was completely ravaged, and its native peoples were either killed or enslaved. Tiamat was captured and taken to Aziz's La, and what remained of her and Bahamut's brood suffered a similar fate. Not long after, the calamity of Earth struck Eorzea, and the entire world felt its effects. Meracydia would be lost to memory at this point. Last reports from the continent stated it was a wasteland, and any native survivors were hostile to outsiders. That's a very brief history of Meracydia. I'll go into more specifics in the second part of this video. On that note, let's jump into theory mode, and explore what we can expect to see, find and encounter on Meracydia in this modern era. The continent of Meracydia lay to the far south of Aetheris, past the South Sea Isles, and is the planet's most southern landmass. It's somewhat visible on a modern map, and can also be seen from Mare Lamentorum. The continent should be reachable by ship or airship, with Thavnair being the closest allied port we could depart from. The world of Aetheris shares some similarities with our own world, particularly in themes and landmass locations. Take Othard and Tural as prime examples. The location of Meracydia and the shape of its landmass has thus propelled theories that this continent will have an Australian or even an oceanic theme. We know the continent was ravaged by the war 5,000 years ago, but could have recovered significantly since then. But going with the Australian theme, here's what Meracydia could look like. Australia is a mixture of multiple climates. It's tropical in the north, has a temperate alpine climate to the southeast and southwest, where most of the country's population resides. Then you have grasslands to the northeast, but for the most part it has a hot and dry region which makes up about 70% of its landmass. Most of us know this region as the Outback. These could make up the zones of Meracydia. The continent's so large in fact it could be the setting for an entire expansion. Weather-wise, it would have all the same types as the rest of Aetheris, but would be subject to sudden and extreme shifts, such as heat waves and storms. On the subject of the land itself, much of it would retain the scars of the war, and the sacrifices the defenders had to make to try push Allag back. When Allag first invaded, the natives of Meracydia were taken by surprise, but they later adapted and slowed the Empire's advance. But being technologically outclassed meant it was only a matter of time. This is when the Ascians stepped in and provided the natives of Meracydia with the knowledge of primal summoning. As a result, these tribes summoned many primals to fight for them, many enduring tempering as a result. Historic records show they used crystals for these summonings, but even with those, the cost of the land would have been great. Given what we know, Meracydia may not have recovered from this. The natives of Meracydia are a mystery to us. We know the Makote were taken from here to Iltibard by the Allagans to be used as slave labour. As for the rest, we only have information on two, in thanks to the information we have on the Warring Triad. The first is a tree-like race, possibly seedkin in origin. The closest comparison we've met are the Leshy, so they could be a highly evolved version of that. The second are only described as a race of centaur. We've not encountered this species in FF14 before, and they're very rare in the series overall. However, we have encountered soulkin called centaurs on multiple occasions, in places like the Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High. Given the latter has many creatures dating back to Allag, perhaps there's some sort of connection there. The last report about the peoples of Meracydia is that they're hostile to outsiders, so we should expect an icy welcome when we arrive. That brings us to technology. Given how little we know about the people of Meracydia, we have no idea how advanced they are technologically, but I suspect they would be quite advanced indeed, and the cause of that would be Allag. The Empire devoted all its resources to this war. This would mean the deployment of manned and automated units, not to mention chimerical creations, alongside Allag's standing army. They would also have established infrastructure, forward operating bases, naval and airship docks to receive supplies from Aldenard, internment facilities for the people and dragonkin they captured, not to mention the technology necessary to capture the primals they defeated, including the Elder Primal. Then there are the standard labs and underground facilities Allag was known for. We should expect to see a fair few of these ruins in such places around Meracydia. What this means is the natives of Meracydia would have had access to these facilities for thousands of years. The civilization of Meracydia could have developed based on Allagan technology. This would have been in stark contrast to Eorzea after Allag's fall, which entered a long dark age where such technology was off limits. The Meracydians would have had no such time loss, and they could very well be in Allag of the modern era. But let's backtrack a bit. I want to talk more about the Allagan armed forces that would have been deployed, as these will make up some of the powerful foes we'll encounter. During the war, Allag had to not only contend with the native people, but also Tiamat, Bahamut and their broods. This was made harder for Allag in thanks to all the primals the defenders summoned. Let's not forget, they may have understood primal tempering back then, but they didn't have a cure or defense for it. Emperor Xande pushed his technologists really hard, executing them daily until they came up with solutions. The issue with the dragons was easy enough to solve. They developed specialized war machina to resist dragon flame, and used them to take down even the largest dragons. It was such machines that overwhelmed and killed the Dawn Wyrm Bahamut. We never found out which machines killed him, but if I had to guess, it was the Kalia series of Hydra. Kalia were so effective in combating dragons that one of them was even placed in Dalamud to guard the Elder Primal Bahamut. It's possible some of them still wander Meracydia to this very day. We know how resilient Allagan technology can be. Dealing with the primals took longer to come up with, but the solution was the creation of a new type of mage, one that could steal the essence of a primal they faced and used it against them. These mages were the first generation of summoners. Allag's final weapon in the conflict, the one which ultimately won them the war, was the Void Scent. Thanks to Xande's pact with the Cloud of Darkness, he opened a massive void gate at Circus Tower, and from it spilled hordes of Voidsent that would go on to fight in Meracydia. The reason this spelled doom for the native people is because each time a defender fell on the battlefield, their corpse was claimed by the soul of a Voidsent, walking the land again as undead. In all likelihood, Voidsent will be a nuisance we will have to contend with on Meracydia. It's also possible Void Gates will be a common sight. These could also be the catalyst for Zero and Golbez's return to the main story. Finally, we have Tiamat and what remains of her brood and Bahamut. Last we saw of her, she departed Eorzea with her kin after the defeat of Lunar Bahamut. She was sighted in Mordona not too long ago, as she helped gather her father's scales for use on the Ragnarok. We later heard her cry out in welcome to her long lost sister Ashdaya. Current theory is she returned to Meracydia, but to be honest, we have no idea where she went. I'd imagine dragons are still remembered in Meracydian history, so they could have been welcomed back by those that dwelled there. And that is everything I have on the continent of Meracydia. I get the feeling that history will play a major role in the story narrative of Meracydia's expansion. Distrust of outsiders will be common, and bridging the gap between our peoples will be a long process. But Meracydia is the one. It's the place well established in lore, the one we've all been waiting for well over a decade. It may well be 9.0 by the time we see it, but we've waited this long and our hunger for it has only grown stronger.